The year 2022 was record-breaking year for warehouses in Poland. 4.4 million square meters was completed, which is actually the best result in history. That is 42% more than in 2021. 52% of spaces was rented by logistics companies, 15% of commercial networks, and 10% by e-commerce and production. It seems that the demand side is still strong as companies want to make their supply chains more efficient. What does it mean for Poland? Today, my guest is Szymon Ostrowski, Managing Director at Newport Logistics Fund. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, logistics is a very hot topic in terms of as an asset class on the real estate market, but of course also in the geopolitical settings, also on the agenda of a lot of companies looking at Poland. But before we start discussing Poland and European logistics market, please briefly introduce yourself and the company.
Yes, thank you very much. As you said, my name is Szymon Ostrowski. I'm Managing Director at Newport Logistics Fund. Newport Logistics Fund, it's a Luxembourg-based fund. Mm-hmm. We are focusing only on developing warehouses in Europe. So we are in the full cycle of buying land with permit, building the warehouses, leasing them out, and then finally selling it to final institutional investors. This is what we do. We started last year in April. The fund was registered with the aim of raising 50 million euro. We have a success in this matter. We have raised 50 million euro in 10 months. And we have also invested all of it into 3 projects. First project is in Zgierz, in central Poland. Second project is in Amsterdam. And the last but not least, the third project is in London, close to Heathrow Airport. Our fund, we are now working on a second fund. The second fund will be 100 million euro size, and we will be looking on assets in Western Europe, France, Spain, Germany, UK, Belgium, among others.
Okay, so very pan-European scope of activities. And also, of course, we met recently at MIPIM in Cannes. So I think that's the best place where you can have a lot of, insights from around Europe. So I'm wondering, where are we now as Europe in terms of logistics market? What are the forecasts?
You said at the beginning about the statistics for Poland. So I think generally I would say logistics are doing very well in Poland and also in Europe. There is high demand for logistics space. There is actually not enough supply, so this creates this opportunity that we are also looking at. Logistics is a very interesting part of the real estate because this is something that you can build very quickly compared to other assets. It provides also, like other assets, fixed income for the investors, which are the final investors which are buying the assets. But what's more important, I think that today logistics are very much doing well because of the current situation, which on one hand, the current situation is demanding, like geopolitics, high inflation, interest rate rising. But on the other hand, there's also opportunities for logistics and warehouses because the war creates needs for warehouses. Supply chain issues requires more warehouses. COVID, we are living now in the world that we are saying that COVID is gone. However, we know it's still there. Who knows what will be happening? Zero COVID policy in China was just closed recently. However, still the supply chains are not back in the same element. And the biggest contributor to the growth and why logistics or warehouses are so interesting is e-commerce, which grew significantly during COVID. But however, it is very important to remember that what have changed in our way how we do shopping, how we do business, the e-commerce part will stay with us. And although it's not growing so fast as it was during pandemic, still it is growing 15-18% on an annual basis, and this requires warehouses. That's one. Second part is nearshoring. For many years, you know that very well, people were saying nearshoring, but nothing was really happening. Now we can actually see that with COVID that really struck the supply chain lines, with war, which kind of affected it even more. This trend is becoming real, and we can see now how, and I'm not saying that the companies are saying, okay, let's close a factory in China, but when they are deciding where to put a new factory, idea of putting it closer to the markets that you are selling the product, Poland, Central Eastern Europe, or generally Europe, is an attractive place, because okay, it might be slightly more expensive in terms of work phase, but on the other hand, it's much closer, and you don't have this uncertain element of transport and logistics and the supply chain.
Yeah, well, definitely being closer to, almost 480 million of customers is something that was an issue, and definitely, the disruptions caused by COVID in the supply chain made this decision to become quicker and faster. You said yourself that actually, all those trends play not only in favor of Poland, but also the whole of Europe. And your fund invests not only in Poland, but also in other countries, like you mentioned, Britain and the Netherlands. As well, with the second fund, you also plan to expand even to other countries like south of Europe. So I'm wondering, when you are taking a look on all those countries in Europe, what are the data standing behind it? Is it this trend, the statistics, the one I mentioned, Poland, which shows quite a big speed up in the investment part? Is it the same in all of the Europe, or Poland like we say, is a black horse in this race?
Answering two questions. So first one, we are looking on Western Europe. The reason why we are looking for Western Europe, because we are a fund and we are serving our investors. We take money from our investors, and then through us, they can invest in the UK, in Germany, in Spain, in France, or wherever we will be doing warehouses in Europe. However, it is important to understand that investors are also looking on diversification, and what we can provide them is not only geographical diversification, but also asset diversification. That's why telling an investor you will have 4 assets in one country compared to you'll have 4 assets across 4 countries, it's a very interesting, from investment point of view, it's a very interesting and a wise way to do business, because spreading risk is always good and diversification is always good.
Yes, but if you put on top of this also the rental levels and other, construction costs and so on, what's the balance?
The balance is, I think that we can say it this way. In Poland, or in Central Eastern Europe, the land is very cheap. Compared to Western Europe. Rents in Poland are going up. Last year, 20-30%. However, they are still 60% lower than Western Europe, which means that in Western Europe, the rents are significantly higher. On the other hand, the supply and demand are more or less the same. So there is a huge need for modern warehouses in Western Europe as well, because it is also very important to remember a warehouse built 20 years ago doesn't have the needs that today we are expecting, or actually the tenants expect. One part, I'm sure we'll talk about it, is ESG.
I will have this question.
And this is an element yes. Also. 20 years ago, approach to ESG, probably nobody knew what ESG was. Today, it's totally different. But going into even, technical elements. 20 years ago, stockpiling, e-commerce was not existing. Today, the warehouse is requiring to be fit in order to support, for example, e-commerce, which in order supports a lot of transportation, logistics, etc. So, warehouses, although they are for 1,000 years, probably we can say a warehouse is a place where you can store places dry, safe, and closed. This doesn't change, but then there is a lot of technology behind today that is required, which, by the way, means, and this is the case, for example, in our first fund, we did this project in London, we actually acquired a brownfield. So we acquired a piece of land with 2 warehouses there in London, which we are taking down, and we are building a modern warehouse. Why we are doing it? Because we can get even more rent from it, because it will be a modern warehouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this ESG is also very important in terms of the investments and transaction point of view, right? Especially now the pressure to be consistent with the ESG criteria is growing. So, tenant can have always a choice. But then if you take a look on the investors, I'm sure that the pressure is huge, and actually they are actually looking only for the assets that actually have this environmental, social and governance policies in place.
Without a doubt, and I think that something which started as a, probably we can say at some point of time it was marketing idea, the whole thing of greenwashing. But I think where we are today, European Union made a huge effort in order to put the taxation, the European taxation, ESG related, etc. So where we are today, it is also almost impossible to get bank financing for something which is not in line with the ESG, let's put it this way, regulations, which this impacts the projects, but also the requirements from tenants who also have their own shareholders, and their shareholders are asking how ESG, how green you are. That's one part, but also the investors, as you had said, because those investors also have their investors and their shareholders, and they are also having their own agenda on checking the boxes whether it's green or not. But on top of this, because I think very often people are saying, oh, ESG, it's a problem, it's an issue. I think we should be looking at it from a different point of view. ESG, with a lot of it being efficiency, energy efficiency, water efficiency, etc., it is an important element, especially today when we are in the middle after over a year of war, which impacted the energy prices, that we can see that being energy efficient, having solar panels, having water containers, having all those things in place, it makes sense, because at the end of the day the bill is lower, plus you are expected to deliver it from banks, from tenants, from investors. So in a way, the whole ecosystem of investors' expectations regarding the ESG is kind of closing, and everybody is expecting it. It's much more developed in Western Europe. It is already coming very strongly to Poland. For us, for example, ESG is important because of all those elements I've said, but also, it's a good thing to do to help the planet and help to limit the negative effect. And of course, there is an effect. And if we can also deliver a product with solar panels or without gas, like the asset that we'll be building in the Netherlands, it will be easier to rent out. So it means it will be easier to sell, which means it will be easier and quicker to give back money to investors, and that's the whole idea.
I also remember some data that actually, of course, probably in 2024 we'll have extra criteria for the biggest companies on the market in Poland, but definitely I think that I read that only 60% of the goals, if you are going net zero, you can achieve at your own company, and the rest is actually around the supply value chain you have around you. Yes, so the pressure will also go for the smaller companies and all the companies that are around. You also mentioned actually nearshoring, and there we have an extra word, which is friendshoring as well, following the war in Ukraine. So I'm wondering how these trends actually play for Poland.
So currently, with the war happening and with the friendshoring trend, Poland, eastern part of Poland, is gaining its momentum in terms of logistics, warehouses, etc. That's without a doubt. On the other hand, once the war will end, we all wish it will end as soon as possible, this area will flourish because of the whole need of getting people, money, equipment, etc. to rebuild Ukraine. So this area there will be a natural part for growth. So definitely Poland will gain additional momentum in terms of warehousing, logistics, but also production, because you need to produce stuff in order then to send it there. So I think it's just a matter of the war finishing. So it's not if, but when. And once it will stop, the war will stop, the process of rebuilding Ukraine will start, this will be, I would say, a golden era for Poland logistics and warehouses, and also for the eastern part of Poland, which even now is developing itself very well. I don't know if you've been recently to Lublin or to Rzeszów.
Yeah, I was taking actually the highway from Warsaw to Rzeszów, and it took me, 4 hours, less than 4 hours.
Exactly,
Which was quite
amazing,
of a shock.
amazing.
Yes.
So these elements, and of course this part from Lublin to Rzeszów, it's part
Via Carpathia.
of Via Carpathia. So this whole Via Carpathia will also boost additional need for warehouses connecting north with south, and of course, the Via Carpathia ends in the Baltic countries, but of course from there it's very close to the wealthy Scandinavian countries. So it's a bigger picture, but yes, without a doubt, the war needs to stop, and once it's end, rebuilding of Ukraine will be a huge boost for the Polish logistics and warehouses as well.
So just coming back for a moment to MIPIM and your insights from maybe discussions you had, long-term and short-term view on the transaction market. What can we expect this year? Because a lot of people are saying that it will be tough because of the inflation, because of the macroeconomic situation.
Let me put it this way. Of course, real estate is a nice two-word industry that you can describe, but of course there are many different elements. Let me maybe say about the logistics and warehouses. I think logistics and warehouses were doing very well, are doing very well, and will be doing very well because of the elements that we have discussed: friendshoring, nearshoring, e-commerce, supply chain. Without a doubt, this is going very, very well. Of course, inflation, of course, cost of energy, of course, cost of funding, because interest rates are high. As we all used to say, we live in a low inflation times. This is over, and it will not come very quickly. So we need to adapt to live in a high interest rates and high inflation. And of course, who will be able to adapt will win, as always. But I think way to really adapt is to do good projects. And I think the cost of capital is this element that really shows and can very clearly define which projects are and which projects are good. Good projects will always defend themselves. Bad projects will not. And basically, maybe at the end of the day, getting rid of the bad projects and just focusing on good projects, good companies, it just makes sense. Yeah, the same applies to, venture capital, private equity, where with the cheap money or free money, startups were growing and were becoming unicorn size, but there were no revenue, but there were no profits. Yeah, so it's not healthy for a long run. So I would say for logistics warehouses, definitely positive. So we can see very much interest in this area. For a general real estate, I would say yes, inflation, interest rates, these are the elements which are difficult. However, as I said, good projects will always find a solution to flourish. Of course, it will be slightly slower probably this year in some of the sectors. However, as we also discussed before, the global trends are not going to stop because we have inflation, or because we've got high interest rates. So we need to move on with stuff, because if not, we will stop. So, and stopping means moving back. So.
Well, thank you. So I would just add on top of this that one-liner maybe would be that the gravity center in general, global gravity center, is changing, and I think that Poland can really benefit out of this in terms of logistics market and what we are looking forward in terms of global supply chains and also those in the European markets.
Yes, and I think we all wish for that to happen and to be happening even more.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And good luck with the project.